Coming out of their day off on Thursday, the Mariners are back at it to host the Astros for the second time this season at T-Mobile Park. We'll get you set for the weekend series and also talk about the notable roster move Seattle made yesterday here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is Friday, May 27, 2022, and this is the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. I'm your host, Ty Gonzalez, reporter and editor over at allseahawks.com, joined as always by my co-host, Colby Patnode. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dane Gonzalez, that's DANE, NZLZ, and Colby at CPAT11, that's CPAT11. Be sure to also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Control the Zone. We typically post 2 additional shows on there every week and get into some bigger ideas and bigger topics, whereas Locked On Mariners covers more the day-to-day with the M's. We also get into some non-baseball discussions on Control the Zone as well. It's fun time, so be sure to check it out. Again, that's patreon.com/Control the Zone. And if this is your first time joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast, welcome to the show. If you like what you hear, give us a follow or subscribe wherever you listen to this. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and give this video a thumbs up. We greatly appreciate it. We're going to be getting into the latest roster move the Mariners made, which is pretty noteworthy. They also made a corresponding move today, so we'll get into that a little bit. We're also going to be talking a little bit about a player that was recently DFA'd that Colby likes for the Mariners. But first, let's get into the series that is starting tonight between the Astros and the Mariners. I've calmed down a little bit after Wednesday's series loss to the A's, but it's still, not a great time right now watching the Mariners. They are 9 games under 500. They are last place in the American League West, and the first place Astros are coming to town. They are 29-16. Obviously, guys like Jeremy Pena, Jose Altuve, Yordan Alvarez, Michael Brantley, they continue to do their thing. And this is going to be a pretty difficult series for the Mariners to survive. There is a very real possibility here that the Mariners, at the end of this, by Monday, by the next time that we get on the show, are 12 games under 500. And we talked about why that is a massive, massive, massive problem on Wednesday's episode, our last episode of Locked On Mariners. And the pitching matchups are not really favorable for the Mariners either. They get Justin Verlander tonight, who they've really struggled against in 2 starts to start this season. And they are countering with Chris Flexen. Then it's Jose Urquidy going on the bump for the Astros tomorrow, with Logan Gilbert going for the Mariners. That's probably their most favorable matchup. Talking about the Mariners, that is. And then Marco Gonzalez versus Luis Garcia on Sunday. I believe that will be the first time the Mariners are seeing Garcia this year. So yeah, Colby, this is a pretty daunting matchup for the Mariners, considering the way that they're struggling right now, and coming off of a series loss to the A's of all teams, one of the worst teams in baseball. I mean, anything less than a sweep is a win for the Mariners, right?
Sadly, yes. This is why it would seem so important to get at least 2 or 3 from Oakland, so that you can, even if you get swept, it wouldn't be a disaster. You'd still be 2-4 heading out onto the road trip. But now you get swept, you go 1-5 at home after going 4-6 on the road, after going, I don't know, what was it, like 2-7 on the last homestand. Like it starts to pile up, and it just becomes. You get to a point where you can play fantastic baseball for the rest of the year, and you've just filled up the hole you've dug yourself, and you've barely started to build up the other side before you just run out of time. So they have to find a way to win one of these games. It's certainly not ideal, but they win one of these games, and they're 10 games under as opposed to 12. So it's a pretty big swing if they can find a way to win one of these. But like you said, the pitching matchups, they're not your friend, but, the Mariners don't really care what the pitching matchups are, because they beat Max Scherzer and Kevin Gausman, They're number 4 in the same week. So, while losing to the A's 3, 4, and 5. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, you can't feel too good with Verlander on the bump tonight. He's been great. against everybody, but particularly the Mariners. So yeah, it's not looking good.
I'm interested to see Julio Rodriguez versus Justin Verlander in particular, because the first matchup, obviously, Julio looked completely, utterly overmatched against Verlander. Then the second matchup looked a little bit better. Didn't he have a single in that game? I can't remember, but he didn't strike out a bunch. That's really the important part there. He didn't look as overmatched the second time. So now getting to see Verlander a third time, I mean, outside of Scherzer, Verlander is probably the best pitcher that starting pitcher that Julio's had to face so far, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he kind of adjusts. In general, I would assume that the lineup is going to be pretty similar to what we saw in the last two games against the A's, with Winker leading off, maybe Frazier hitting third again, with France in between, and then Julio hitting cleanup, etc. Considering where this lineup is and the injuries that have been sustained and everything, are there, I mean, other than that lineup that they put together, is there maybe like a better way to approach that? Because I know that, you've wanted Winker in the leadoff spot for a while. They're now doing that. That's the one spot that he's been consistently really good in wherever he's played. But aside from that, are there any other changes you would make to this lineup right now?
Yeah, there's really not a lot you can do because guys just have to hit better. I mean, there's a certain element of like you're just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic after it hit the iceberg. There's nothing that you can do until you stop, taking on water. So, yeah, guys have to hit better. And, we did see JP start to swing it a little bit in the Oakland series. Julio was pretty good in the Oakland series, obviously. Winker looked a little bit better, but Ty France continues to hit. Frazier had a really bad series. So, you just ultimately you need guys to hit better, and it's nice that Lewis is there, and it's nice that you can kind of lengthen the lineup a little bit by having him in there. In theory, tonight we'll see how he's feeling after playing back-to-back days, even after the off day. But yeah, the guys just have to hit better. You need more consistency from Adam Frazier, who's kind of been up and down, up and down. You need Winker to look like he's looked for his entire career, with the exception of these 6 weeks. And if those things start to happen, Julio finds some kind of level. Obviously, he won't be a 350 hitter for the rest of the year, but if you can find, just be solid average, have Kyle Lewis be solid average, then the order that they hit in really not going to matter all that much. They have to hit. And unfortunately, there's not enough of them hitting right now that there's no like magic, like, well, those three guys have to be together because they have to all hit. Like, you know what I mean? It doesn't really exist because on a night-to-night basis, there usually aren't three guys who are swinging the bat really well in the Mariners lineup. So guys just have to hit better.
Yeah, there's been a conversation on Twitter the last couple of days of like who's to blame for the Mariners' recent struggles, and right now, there's a lot of people pointing the finger at Jerry. There's a lot of people pointing the finger at Scott Service and his staff. There's a lot of people pointing the finger at John Stanton and the ownership group. But really, I think it's more, it comes down to really two key things. One, players are just not performing, as you said. Guys are just not hitting. Guys like Jesse Winker, who last year, in this offseason we sung the praises of after they got him, was one of the best hitters in all of baseball. He hasn't performed anywhere close to that this year. Adam Frazier's been kind of streaky. JP Crawford has been kind of streaky. Eugenio Suarez has been really streaky, right? And then you got a couple of guys who are really like true, 2 outcome, 3 outcome hitters, where it's like, all right, this guy is only, he's only going to strike out or he's going to hit a bomb here. There's, like guys like Taylor Trammell right now who are in the lineup and have a 50-50 split walks and strikeouts right now through 3 games. And, that's just, and then, the other key thing here as well is the lack of depth. And that kind of goes into the discussion about the bottom of this lineup and having, multiple black holes at the bottom of your lineup for the most part, because, they've sustained injuries with Haniger and Murphy most prominently, and they don't have the depth to survive that, to withstand that. And so you're seeing this all kind of come together where there's a lot of streaky hitters and there's which we've seen through and through already here through the first month and a half. It's pretty common for a lot of these guys to go on a 1 week hot streak and then just fall apart for the next 10 days. And so you pair that with the lack of depth, and this team is just, it's not conducive to scoring runs consistent with any sort of consistency on a nightly basis. So who knows how it's going to go tonight, tomorrow, and the next day against the Astros. This team could very well explode, and like even with the way that they're playing, I would not be surprised if somehow they found a way to take 2 or 3 from the Astros. But the more likely scenario here, of course, is that they're going to get absolutely obliterated, because on paper, that's what that suggests. This is just an awful matchup for them right now, where they currently are, and just they're not playing with a ton of confidence either right now, and nor should they really be playing with any sort of confidence, because they've been beaten down over this last month or so. So hopefully the off day allowed them to maybe reset, and who knows if there was kind of how last year that we heard about, there was like clubhouse meetings and impromptu player meetings and stuff like that, and maybe there's been something like that to maybe build up the energy back in that clubhouse. But overall, it's just it's a rough time right for the Mariners. So there was a player recently DFA'd that you're interested in. We're going to be talking about him in just a moment. But real quick, a reminder, this episode of Locked On Mariners is brought to you by Built Bar. We've been asking, and Built delivered. Built granola bars are here. Built granola bars come in 3 unbelievable flavors: chocolate peanut butter, chocolate coconut, and white chocolate berry. Want to try all 3 flavors? You can get a mixed box at Built.com right now. These are so different from the bars and the puffs. Built granola bars are loaded with granola. It's the perfect combination of crunch and chewiness. But just like bars and puffs, these babies are packed with protein and covered in 100% real chocolate. With 150 calories, 15 grams of protein, and only 4 grams of sugar, Built granola bars will change your world. Built has cracked the code to better granola. They're the perfect healthy snack to pack in your lunch, take on the road, or eat as a snack. And they are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. So go to Built.com to get Built granola bars now. Use promo code LOCKED15, that's LOCKD15, for 15% off your order. Again, that's LOCKD15 for 15% off your order. You're listening to Locked On Mariners. Thank you again for making us your first listen of the day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast. There are recaps of MLB games with analysis from our local experts, taking fans through the season like no other network. It is free and available wherever you get your podcasts, just like us. So let's dive into this player that you're pretty intrigued by. Yu Chang of the Cleveland Guardians was recently DFA'd. He was a former well-regarded prospect in that system. He's an infielder, can play multiple spots, just hasn't been able to hit at the major league level. But tell me why you're interested in him for the Mariners.
Have you seen Dylan Moore play? Next segment. But no, Yu Chang was actually pretty good in 2021 relative to his role and relative to what the Mariners are currently getting out of kind of that utility infield role, where they're not even willing to use Sam Haggerty. Dylan Moore is a dumpster fire of a hitter at the plate and not that good of a right fielder either. And you just kind of look at what Yu Chang did last year. He was 75th percentile in max exit velo, 81st percentile in sprint speed, 86th percentile, and outs above average. The overall numbers don't look great in 250 plate appearances, about half a year, give or take. He hit 14 doubles, 3 triples, 9 home runs, hit 228 with a 267 on base and a 426 slug. I know there are people out there who like to gatekeep improvement and say that's not a big enough improvement, but again, I refer you to Dylan Moore's numbers. And you tell me that wouldn't be a big improvement. He can play second, short, third base. He's even played some first base. Pretty good base runner. He does have some power. The 426 slug is pretty nice. Does strike out a little too much, which is part of the issue, part of the reason why he was DFA'd. He does not have any options left either, so you have to carry him for the rest of the as long as you want to carry him, I should say. So it's not like you can stash him in AAA. But hey, you know who you could stash in AAA? Dylan Moore. So yeah, I feel like this guy is better than Dylan Moore. I feel like there's still some upside here. He's also got some of the traits that Jerry really likes. He's a former, not top prospect, but he is a former legitimate prospect, let's say, who has produced fairly well in the minor league level. He's a good athlete. He is got some power, some right-handed power, and he feels like a guy that the Mariners might be able to help overall. So what do I want Yu Chang? Well, first of all, he's not Dylan Moore. Second of all, the Mariners might actually be able to get something out of their utility spot. And, he's got some right-handed power, which is nice to come off the bench. He's a pretty good base runner, add some speed to the bench as well. So I just look at what the Mariners have currently on their bench. Mike Ford, Dylan Moore, Sam Haggerty, those are, with all due respect, those are nobodies. Like, there's a 0% chance any of those guys are long-term answers for the Mariners. And there is a, albeit small, chance, there is a chance nonetheless that Yu Chang could develop himself into a nice role with the Mariners, maybe some way Aledmus Diaz has kind of played his way into a role with the Houston Astros. So that's why I'm interested in Yu Chang. I just feel like he's represents a significant upgrade to the bench, and whether it's Dylan Moore or Sam Haggerty or even Mike Ford, I feel like you're better off with Chang on your bench than you are any of those guys.
So another thing to note here on Chang is that he's only played in 12 total games this year between AA, AAA, and Major League Baseball. So he hasn't had time to get ramped up. And doing a little bit of research here while you were talking, he went on the COVID list on April 15th and was not activated from it until May 13th. So nearly an entire month on the COVID list. Not sure if that was entirely because of COVID or there was another injury there. But that's also something to kind of keep in mind here, is if he was dealing with kind of an extended bout with COVID, how that might impact him the rest of the way here and impact him physically. So just something to keep in mind there if you are adding Chang, is like he's going to need time to get ramped up here because he hasn't played much this season. So, but yeah, I mean, like... Had to add it. You had to add it. Yeah, okay. It's an interesting shot, though. If you want to take, I mean, because you need to try something here, right? Like the current group of players that you have right now is just not working, particularly with your bench guys. And it's not great. It's not. Chang isn't, there isn't really a lot of promise necessarily, but it's a shot, and it's not going to cost you really anything to get him. So,
right. Again, I refer you to the current Mariners bench and look at their numbers.
Yeah. So might as well just take the shot, quite frankly, and see if you can get something out of him. See if maybe you change the scenery, and see if you can implement a plan there with him that gets him back on track, and just roll with it. Because like you said, he is a talented player, and again, a former highly regarded prospect. If there's still talent there that can be tapped into potentially there, and so and the Mariners have been pretty solid at doing that with certain guys, and raising players' floors, raising players' ceilings, and going from there. And they've gotten some pretty nice contributions out of guys like that. So you never know. It's always worth just kicking the tires in these situations. Mm-hmm. So we'll see if they do that. The Mariners also made a roster move yesterday that was pretty notable, and they've made a corresponding move today that goes along with that. So we are going to be talking about that in just a moment. But real quick, a reminder, this episode of Locked On Mariners is brought to you by BetOnline. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wager information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline is where the game starts. So the Mariners have optioned Drew Steckenrider right-hand reliever down to AAA Tacoma. Obviously, last few outings for Steckenrider have been a struggle. He has been nowhere near as productive as he was last year, which is kind of tied into a lot of the returning relievers for the Mariners this year as well. That's kind of been the trend here, unfortunately. Thankfully, Paul Sewald has been able to avoid most of that regression. He's been, he's had a couple of rough outings here and there, but for the most part, Sewald has been solid. Sergio Romo has been solid. Andres Munoz has shown some stuff, but has obviously had some struggles here and there as well. But the Mariners, we talked about it. They needed to do something, and you mentioned sending Steckenrider down as something that they could do on Wednesday's episode as something that maybe they could do to just shake things up and send a jolt into this team a little bit by sending down a more prominent name, a more noteworthy name in this organization right now. So so what do you think about the decision to move on from Steckenrider? Well, not really move on. He's still in the organization. They can still call him up when they want to. He had two options, minor league options remaining. But what do you think about the move to send him down here? And do you think that sends maybe a message to this group at all?
I think I hope so. I mean, Steckenrider's making $3 million this year, and the Mariners sent him to the minors, to the bus leagues. So I would hope that would serve as some kind of wake-up call. But again, ultimately, guys just have to play better. Like it really is, as much as we say, well, maybe that's the turnaround point. Maybe it could be if they magically start to play better. Maybe not even as a result. Maybe it just they're a better team than we think, and then they start to play better just because they're more talented than they're performing right now. So certainly hope that's the case. I think it's a move that had to be done. Ultimately, going from him to Elías, you probably didn't really upgrade much. As much as I like Roenis, pretty much you trust him to do the same thing you would trust Steckenrider to do right now, which is not a lot. So it's kind of a lateral move at most. But hey, I like Roenis. He's seems like a good guy, and there's certainly the possibility that he's helpful and he's an upgrade. But there's not a ton of value going from Steckenrider to Elías. It's just kind of a lateral move, but it is, if nothing else, it's a wake up call that, hey, just because you're making some money on this team doesn't mean we won't replace you.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, Roenis Elías called up. He has his contract selected by the Mariners because he was not added to the 40-man roster when he was brought up for the Toronto series. That was an exception made by Major League Baseball because Steckenrider could not make the trip due to vaccine-related reasons. So he was not a member of the 40-man roster, and clearly the 10-day rule with sending guys down and then bringing them back up for non-injuries does not apply to Elías because of his special exemption as well. So this is his first time actually on the Mariners 40-man roster since he was traded a couple of years ago to Washington back in 2019. So getting Elías back, I mean, you obviously talked about why you like him, just kind of as a person, as a player. He's been with the Mariners 3 times now, 3 different stints with the Mariners organization, maybe even 4. So what are we getting out of this version of Roenis Elías, who's now a pure reliever?
Tough to say, really. Only saw him pitch the one time. He's always been fastball, curveball, and mixing the changeup a little bit. It seems to be that's still his go-to. What you're really getting from Elías is you're getting some versatility. Again, he is a guy who can go multiple innings. He is a guy who can come in and get the last out of like the 6th inning with a guy on second. But he's really just not a guy who has the stuff anymore to be really a high leverage guy. But, Steckenrider never really had good stuff anyways. I think people – they look at Steckenrider's ERA and they're like, oh my God, he was amazing last year. And he was pretty good, don't get me wrong, but didn't miss a ton of bats, didn't strike guys out, had some walks. Like Steckenrider's just a middle reliever at the end of the day. And Elías, I think, could do that. He's been okay in Tacoma. He had a couple bad outings that kind of inflated his overall numbers. but it's still going to be fastball, curveball from Elias, and hopefully he throws strikes and quality strikes, because if he can do that, then he's an upgrade, albeit probably a minor one, over Steck, because Steck just couldn't throw quality strikes at this point. So we'll see what he gets, what he can give the Mariners. At the very least, he gives you some length. He can give you, an inning and a third, 2 innings, maybe even 3 innings if the situation were to call for it. But it's worth noting he's coming off of Tommy John, and you never really know what you're going to get on a day-to-day basis with guys the first year off of their Tommy John surgery. So we'll see what they get from him. But yeah, it's fastball, it's curveball, it's low 90s fastball. It's a pretty big curveball, and hope for the best and see if that plays, because what do you have to lose?
Yeah, and frankly, I mean, how much worse could he be than Drew Steckenrider if all things fall apart here? So, because Steckenrider has been, he's been a disaster, quite frankly. I was like, is disaster a little too strong of a word there? No, considering what he was last year going into this year, and what he's been this year, it's been more or less a disaster for Drew Steckenrider. But seems like the Mariners might be getting more reinforcements on the way, potentially with Ken Giles is starting to ramp back up here. But he still seems like he's at least a few weeks away from getting back with the major league team. So there's still ways to go until it happens, and therefore, once again, we're going to say it again. I know we're a broken record, but the Mariners need to look outside of the organization here to get better. It's the only way that they're going to be able to do it. They could not do it internally. The Mariners are not going to significantly improve just off of what they have right now in the organization. Quite frankly, that's just what it is. That's just the way that it is right now. And, again, going back to the discussion last year, or, a couple segments ago about who's to blame. I mean, some of it is ignoring the depth, and some of it is just players not performing, and that's certainly been the case with the bullpen, which, that was the main reason, or at least one of the main reasons last year that the Mariners were able to win as many games as they did and as many close games as they did, and now they're not able to pull those games off or frankly, they're not even able to keep games close because they don't have an above average to an elite bullpen. They are below average considerably. They have maybe 2 guys that they can really trust right now out of the bullpen. Hopefully, Elias can surprise us here and maybe be another guy that they can actually lean on over the summer. Hopefully he sticks. It would be nice to see, because I am also a pretty big fan of Roenis Elías. But that's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Ty Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dane Gonzalez, that's DaneGNZLZ, and Colby at CPAT11, that's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. And thank you again for making us your first listen of the day, just like you do here every day. Now make your second listen of the day Locked On MLB. That's where Paul Francis Sullivan, and please call him Sully, brings you his unique perspective on the Major League's present and past. It's free wherever you get your podcast, just like us. So have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we will see you on Monday.